after the Apollo program, what was the American launch vehicle for humans? The space shuttle. Okay, there she be. Okay.
This thing doesn't compare as near as the 75.
So in terms of lift, the space shuttle had a similar lift power, like thrust, to the Saturn V, but the thing that it was taking into orbit was much bigger. Okay, the shuttle, the entire shuttle went into orbit, whereas with the Saturn V, you only had a small portion of it go into orbit, right? Yeah, so let's talk about the shuttle. So the space shuttle was designed as kind of a space plane, okay? Space plane for primarily building things in space and delivering large payloads into space. Okay, you can see here the cargo bay doors are open there. I will say the space shuttle was a beautiful machine. I mean, it looked pretty.
Could it fly?
It flew kind of like a brick. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's the cargo bay doors. This is the Canadarm. Yes, the Canadarm. This is a robotic arm built by the Canadian Space Agency. And yes, Canada has a space agency. And their thing is robotic arms in space. Like, that is their thing. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So this is the Canadarm. It's this arm that is installed into the interior of the cargo bay of the space shuttle. Yeah, exactly. Like, you guys build the launch system, this hugely complex, unbelievably designed space plane, and we're gonna make a robotic arm to put on it. How about that?
We're gonna put something on it that you learned when you were in high school.
The Da Vinci Academy Junior High School robotics team providing the robotic arm for space shuttle. No, okay. No, this is actually a really cool design. So the space shuttle has this is the crew compartment. Can seat up to 7 astronauts. Seat up to 7 astronauts and carry relatively large payloads up into space. It's pretty big. So if we look at so if we look at a size comparison here, just so we can get a good view of it, let's pull this one up. That's pretty good. Here's a person standing next to a replica of the space shuttle. That is to scale, yes. Yes, you could put a bus inside of the payload ferry. Inside of the payload, the cargo bay.
Technically, more than 7 people could fit in there.
You could put, yes, you could put many more humans into the payload bay, but
will they survive?
No, because the payload bay is not pressurized.
They'll do that thing where, like, I heard that, like, if you put bugs in one of those, like, toy rockets and then launch it, we all, like, experience, like, too much heat.
Well,
like that.
G's, well, yeah, you would die from the decompression before you die of the G's. So we have, this is the space shuttle when it's in orbit, right? If we look at the shuttle when it launched, I did have a picture here that I was going to show you, but I lost it. Oh, this one's cool. They would transport the shuttle on the back of a 747.
Oh, right.
Was it Ryan?
That is so smart.
They just put a plane on another plane.
So the space shuttle couldn't really fly like a plane
Why?
because it didn't. Well, it had rocket engines, right? But it didn't have jet engines. Rocket engines burn really fast, right? The main engines of the space shuttle were designed to burn for about 6 minutes.
90% gliding.
So when they would come back to Earth, it was all gliding. There was no powered flight, and it was gliding kind of like how a brick glides.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. The glide ratio was like 8-to-1. So like it fell 8 meters for every 1 meter that it went forward.
Oh, no.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was not designed to fly. It was designed. It was designed to fall with style. Yeah, it was designed to like barely be able to land in a decent way.
That's like telling me you just spread your arms out.
So it would land. Well, it would land horizontally, quote unquote, like a plane. Quote unquote, like a plane. But it had to flare like all of its flaps at the very last second to try and pitch up, and then it would touch down, and then it had a parachute to slow it. Oh, dude, landing this thing. In order to be the pilot of the space shuttle, you had to be an insane Air Force or Navy pilot or Marines pilot.
You have to be all three.
Yeah, like we can talk about a few of the astronauts that flew on this thing. But this is what the space shuttle looked like when it would take off.
In order to go on the space shuttle, you have to survive the Titanic.
Survive the Titanic. Yeah, the space shuttle was not very safe, and we'll talk about that in just a second.
You know, the Titanic.
Was there ejector seats in the space shuttle?
There were no ejector seats.
So they were just screwed.
There was also no escape tower.
There's no capsule.
There's no
So
capsule.
front, there's just my Lego set.
The front does not come off.
Everything comes off.
The front does not come off. The whole thing is all connected. The space shuttle was a beautiful machine, but it had all sorts of problems, which is why we don't use it at all today.
I think that's parachuted and then nose down.
The last time the space shuttle was used was in 2011. It had 135 missions, the space shuttle, most of which were perfectly successful and safe. However, there were 2 that killed the entire crew.
So that's not a bad round. Out of 100. I mean, that's only be
Out of 100?
That's like 150.
Guys.
That's not bad.
A 1% failure rate, I'm not getting on a plane that has a 1% failure. If you have a 1% chance of getting in a car accident, that means that you would get in a car accident like every 50 days. Because I guarantee you that you're in a car accident, or that you're in a car twice per day on average. I know you're going to space. I know, but I'm not getting in a car that has a 1%. No, dude. That's okay. So not only just a car accident, like a lethal boom car accident, like your car lights on fire and then explodes. I do want to go to space, but I'd rather go to space on a vehicle that has. Yeah, I want to go to Mars, and I want to live and die on Mars, but I don't want to die on impact.
I mean, at least you make it.
Okay?
At least you're alive while in the action.
Okay, so
You do survive a lot because you do not 5 children and then you have 5 children. So let's not say that.
okay, so you have probably heard of the Challenger disaster.
Oh, I've heard.
Space Shuttle Challenger. The Space Shuttle Challenger was the 25th mission. So there were 6 space shuttles built. They were quote unquote reusable. Challenger, Columbia, Atlantis, Endeavor, and Enterprise. Okay.
We got the capitalist one.
The Enterprise never flew to space. It was a test vehicle.
They sold it off to a big corporation.
No, it was named Enterprise because Star Trek fans are kind of extra sometimes.
You bullied them into naming it.
They literally did. They're like, hey, NASA. They spammed them into naming the test shuttle Enterprise. Okay, so this is the crew of STS-25, the Space Shuttle Mission 25. The Challenger, okay? Yeah, 7 astronauts, okay? Well, 6 astronauts and 1 teacher, yes. This was going to be the first teacher to go to space. They launched on an especially cold morning. Yes, an O-ring was frozen.
A what?
An O-ring, it's a rubber ring around the inside of a solid rocket booster. It failed, and the solid rocket booster exploded. When it exploded, the fuel tank, the orange fuel tank attached to the outside of the space shuttle also exploded. And that's
the letter one.
That's what happened. Okay. Obviously, no one survived that. This was a very traumatic experience for a lot of people all over the country. Because this was the launch of the first teacher into space, this was shown in the majority of elementary schools in the United States.
And they didn't cut it off.
So if you know anyone that was in elementary school in 1983, ask them if they remember the Challenger, and I promise you that they will say yes. This was a very traumatic experience for a lot of people, okay? Because this was shown on live television. Yeah, so it's a really unfortunate event. Yeah.
Schools have like rules against live streaming content now.
They do not. They do not.
We could watch like a human SpaceX.
We could watch a SpaceX launch of humans. Thankfully, the SpaceX capsule is a heck of a lot safer than the space shuttle ever was. The space shuttle was designed to be this really safe, really cheap, reusable spacecraft. It was none of those. It was safe, it was not reusable, it was not reliable, and it was not cheap. At the end of the space shuttle program, the average cost per launch of the space shuttle was almost $1 billion US. Okay? In today's money. Okay? So, the Challenger disaster, this was in January of, I think, 1983. Okay? Really unfortunate event. Yeah. The space shuttle, or sorry, it was 1986. Okay? Now we need to talk about the other lethal space shuttle event, the Columbia.
What mission?
Columbia was STS, sorry, let me pull it up. It was in 2003. I remember when this happened. STS 102. No, what? No, 107. Sorry, STS 107. Okay. This was another event where 7 astronauts lost their lives.
What happened here?
What happened here? That's an excellent question. So Columbia was different from Challenger in that Challenger exploded on ascent. Columbia broke apart on reentry.
What happened? Did it just get too hot or something? That looks pretty hot.
Yeah, so Columbia broke apart on reentry because a piece of foam insulation on the outside of the orange fuel tank. Okay, so this is covered in orange insulation to keep the hydrogen cold. Okay, because they pump this thing full of liquid hydrogen, and they need to keep it cold before they launch. In order to do so, they cover it in this insulation, and the problem is the insulation freezes because it gets really cold, right? When the space shuttle would launch, it would create a lot of vibration, and pieces of this insulation would break off.
Or did this piece break off?
So right here is where the space shuttle connects to the tank, and yes, this right here, there was a piece of insulation that broke off, and it fell during launch, and it hit the forward edge of the wing of the shuttle, and it took off a few of the tiles of the heat shield. So there was a hole in the heat shield on the leading edge, which is the part of the space shuttle that would get the hottest on reentry.
How did the tiles fall off so easily?
The tiles, so these tiles are not like clay tiles. These are tiles made out of a carbon-carbon composite. We call it CCC. That is extremely good at dissipating heat, but it's very, very brittle. It's so brittle that you can actually scratch it with your fingernail.
And I cut it.
Yeah. Okay. This was a huge design flaw in the shuttle. Okay. And this was actually not the first instance where pieces of the heat shield were damaged during launch from falling debris, from falling foam.
This is just like the worst of it.
This was the worst event, yes. The frame and body of this space shuttle was made out of aluminum. And aluminum is very light and quite strong, but it has a low melting point. And so during reentry, the compromised portion of the heat shield was essentially failed, and then the frame of the shuttle underneath it melted, and the wing tore off. And then when the wing tore off, the drag was uneven on the spacecraft, and the spacecraft turned sideways into the wind stream, and then broke apart from the aerodynamic and heating forces. Here's a representation. The frame of the space shuttle melted, and then so the drag became asymmetrical as the left wing was shorn off, and then it turned sideways into the wind stream and broke apart. Okay. This was a very sad day. I remember this dominating the news for a couple of days. Yeah. So after this, the huge investigation as to what happened was opened. This is all of the debris that was recovered, scattered across a debris field that was almost 1,000 miles long. stretched from Arizona to Louisiana.
Ooh. That's a whole
It's a
one.
little easy.
There were a lot of pieces recovered, right, from the shuttle.
There's pieces that they missed. That are still out.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's almost surely there's a lot of pieces that are just out there on the ground somewhere.
Yeah, but you're home.
Yeah, really, really sad. I mean, there were flight suit pieces recovered. Some human remains as well.
Like how that,
Pretty brutal.
like full body or like.
No body. At those speeds, your body gets torn apart.
Or this thing,
Yeah, I mean, fingers, feet recovered. Yeah, really, really unfortunate.
They've been like how would I say it? They've had almost.
Yeah, death would have been pretty quick. Yeah, as soon as the shuttle started to come apart. Yeah, so really, really unfortunate story, the Columbia disaster and the Challenger. So those are the two lethal events that the space shuttle had. The space shuttle just had all sorts of really bad problems. It was designed to be this incredible machine, and in reality, it just wasn't safe, wasn't well put together. Okay? That is an excellent question that I was just about to talk about. So far we've talked about all these different programs that the Soviets had essentially not a copy, but like a counterpart, right? The space shuttle is no different. The Soviet Union built what was called the Buran.
Silly name. Also looks very silly.
If you saw a picture of this, more than likely you wouldn't realize that it was not the space shuttle. This is Buran, a Soviet version of the space shuttle.
Man, you even have a good big posting spot. So like NASA is like you can have like this say you put those like
Which
I don't
one
know
was
what they're
safer?
called.
Or were they both equally bad?
So the Buran actually never flew with people on it. It only flew twice, both of which were not crewed, but both were successful.
And thus bringing a score of no deaths at all.
Well, the Soviet Union, you will recall that the Soyuz 1, the cosmonaut of Soyuz 1 died, right? The Soviet Union had one other lethal spaceflight event where 3 astronauts died in a Soyuz as it undocked from another spacecraft. One of the air supply hoses was not completely shut off, and when they undocked, the capsule depressurized.
Wait, so was it human error?
No, well, yes, it was human error, but it wasn't their fault. It was the valve didn't close. And so they were actually the only people to die in space. Those 3 cosmonauts are the only 3 humans in history that died in space. Everyone else has died on launch or re-entry.
And then everybody died trying to go to the moon.
Nobody died in the Apollo program. Nope. Okay.
There was almost that one guy.
Almost that one guy.
Yeah, on the moon.
That's
Where
crazy.
was it Armstrong, I'm sure? Yeah, and he almost destroyed his backpack.
Yeah, so there's been some accidents. I mean, Apollo 13 was really close, right? Those guys almost didn't make it back. But yeah, this is the Buran. It only flew twice. Very, very similar to the Shuttle. It was never used for human spaceflight. The rocket that it was attached to, so the Shuttle was like, the engines were on the back of the Shuttle. The Buran was different in that its main engines were not on the orbiter, the plane portion, but rather on the bottom of the fuel tank, which in my personal opinion makes more sense. So it had these four gigantic rocket engines on the bottom of the main fuel tank. This was called the Energia launch system, which was only used a few times. In my opinion, this is like one of the coolest designs that's ever been built.
It's a lot of boosters.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
one heck of a machine.
Yeah.
It's got a dump truck on
It at least.
It also did not use solid rocket boosters on the side. These were liquids.
I feel like liquid is just always better.
Liquid is generally better than solid. More controllable.
Is it just that it's cheaper? Solid?
Solids are way cheaper. Yeah, solids are, and they're way simpler, so easier to manufacture. Okay. The Energia company in the Soviet Union. Yeah. Okay. So the space shuttle built the International Space Station. Sure did. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Dang it. Here's an image of the shuttle docked to the space station. Pretty cool. There's Canadarm sticking out. There's a robotic arm on the International Space Station. You can probably guess who built it.
Canada.
The Canadians. It's called Canadarm 2.
That's a tough name.
Canadarm. Yep.
Yeah, that's a dumb name.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. You, my friends, are going to be researching a space station module. Okay, which are the different pieces of the space station. Okay. You could do Canadarm 2. Sure. Yep.
Canada won. Well, you know what?
This is gonna be a class discussion. Okay. So what could you research about a module of the space station?
Are we not going to
We are. I have not made it available to you yet.
Are we using the laptops?
You could
Yeah.
try that up, you can,
So if it's the American, if it's on the American side, it did come up with the shuttle. But if it's on the Soviet or the Russian side, it came up on a different rocket. Okay? What else could we learn about it?
What it does, how it works, the docking process that took place, the complications that took place.
Was the dog ever let onto the International Space Station?
A dog? No, not that I can think of, but there are a couple of artificial intelligent robots on there. Yeah, there's one, I forget his name. Space Station, AI. What is his name? I'm trying to remember. Oh, here he is. Oh, yeah. Simon.
Buzz Aldrin with Buzzing.
There's Simon.
Simon looks
That's actually kind of terrifying.
Can he get mad?
I think
He can change his facial expression. I don't think that he is currently active.
he's the one who destroyed those two space stuff.
He has these. You can see these. Those aren't speakers. Those are fans. So he can move. He can move himself around the space station by.
If he actually lives in the actual does he have to see any other sport, or do people actually have to, like, you know?
So they can. He's essentially like a glorified Alexa.
Simon says.
Right. So it's like. So you'd say, "Hey Simon, show me the schematics for this module of the space of the station," and then you could pull up a map of any part of the space station, or like a procedure on how to fix something on the station.
And then you can start, and then you hear a fan. So
And it
that's
says
like,
open the windows.
Yeah. So there you go. That's Simon.
wait,
So it
if
says
you,
turn on
if
heat.
you, wait, if you breathe,
And
you
sure,
move in the
yes,
opposite direction of where you're breathing.
If you blow really hard on the space station,
Simon.
you can generate some backward thrust.
What?
Yes.
If you just did like a tiny breath, will you move like almost like
That's the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Okay, bye.